Good morning. This is Karen A. from Jerusalem. I'm here with my buddy, Christy, my fellow intelligent agent, spearhead of God's everlasting creation. Mm-hmm. And that's who we all are here on this call. Catch my breath. Welcome to the Afro-Euro Reco12 podcast. We bring together people of all addictions, all afflictions, to share their experience, strength, and hope on how they've recovered through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, working the steps, and of course, working with others. If you'd like to share on this podcast, we're always looking for new speakers who will share in the Afro-Euro Timezone, but you can live anywhere in the world if you're up. I'll put my number in the chat so you can message me, or you can go to Reco12.com. You can go to that website, Reco12.com, to hear other shares and get more experience, strength, and hope, like Noodle It Out with Nikki, the Big Book Roundtable with Justin B, Nikki M, and other guests, and lots of other awesome speakers, including yours truly. If you'd like to contribute a seventh tradition that helps cover the cost of Zoom, etc., you could do so at Reco12.com/support. And we accept PayPal and Venmo. Without further ado, I want to introduce our fellow Christy. Chris will share a little bit about himself, his recovery bio, if you will, and his experience, strength, and hope. I got to pull up your topic here. A sane and sound ideal. That is Christy's topic for today, a sane and sound ideal. So Chris, welcome. I'll give you about, 20 minutes. If you want, you could have 25 too. I'll try and give you a time warning when we're close to the end. Folks on the Zoom, please put your questions in the chat. You can put them as you go if you're worried about forgetting them. Put your questions in the chat, and at the end of Chris's share, he will hopefully answer them. I'll get some questions going too. And welcome, Christy.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Karen. I'm also catching my breath because I'm just running back from a school run. So I know the fear. This is a great thing about recovery.
That's what we do. That's what we do. We parents in recovery.
Yeah. You get busy in recovery. Life gets big, and we sometimes have to rush around like mad. And that's the case for me this morning. So I'm very, very grateful to be here. I'm a very, very grateful member of the Reco12 Big Book sponsorship community. Very grateful member of the wider 12-step community, AA and Cocaine Anonymous, my main fellowships. I'm going to talk today about a sane and sound ideal because I think it's such a fantastic tool in the book. The whole big book is a tool. That's all it is. And we get the opportunity to use it to improve our recovery in our life, and the life of those about us. So, and this has been a really important tool for me over the years. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about how it applies to sex, relationships, but how it applies more broadly across our whole life, which is the way that I use it. If something is important in my life, if an area of my life is important, I will have some form of sane and sound ideal around it. I will do some work around that, using the big book, following the instructions, trying to come up with something. And my experience with it is that I'm much better off to have something, a bad first version, than nothing. If I'm going through areas of my life, important areas of my life, just completely blind, I'm in trouble. So just to say a little bit about myself, I'm going to share my sobriety date. Now, if you were to ask me how is recovery going, how is all this journey going, I hope time wouldn't be the first thing I would say, because I think time is a side effect of working a good program. And I love to hear from people who are enthusiastic and getting results from this book, as the big book says, no matter how long around they are. But I think it's also important that to remember that when I came into these meetings, all I wanted was to stop using coke and drinking and doing ecstasy and smoking skunk and whatever other drug I could get my hand on. And if the world of the spirit would have been meaningless to me. Just tell me that this will work for me to solve this drink and drug problem. And so I share my sobriety date with that in mind. So I got sober on the 23rd of December 2005. It was my first Cocaine Anonymous meeting. I've never picked up since then. I always like to share that. But the reality is I was in and out of AA for 2 years, and AA was not my problem. I am an alcoholic, and I could have diagnosed myself and had a successful experience there. But because I would do other drugs, I think I always felt there was an open door for me in AA that I can stop. Maybe if I can stop drinking, but I can still smoke weed or what have you. So December 23rd, 2005, I came into a pocket of enthusiasm in North London, and I found a fantastic sponsor, Mr. Jason L, my friend who lives in North London, who's still doing the same thing with people coming through into the fellowship. And we went through line by line of the big book, and it took a little while, but I had nothing else going on in my life, and I was absolutely diligent and did exactly as I was instructed. And I had that effect. I was set free of the obsession to use. That obsession's never come back. I've never found myself battling drink and drugs. That's the difficult thing to explain to people who are not in AA, that they'll often go, "Oh God, you've done so well, haven't you? It must be so tough." And it's like, well, it would be tough if I was doing it. You know, if I was consciously choosing not to drink a drug and I was avoiding it and I was dodging it at every turn, then yeah, it would be really, really tough. But that's not my experience. I've been set free. And as I say, the obsession's never come back. So I had a period, because of the blessings that recovery has given me, I had a period to 2022 where I was going to pick up a birthday chip. It was my 17-year birthday chip, and I was obsessed about it for a few weeks before. And I was thinking about this funny Facebook post I put on and how many likes I'd get. And when I actually got the chip in my hand, I realized I'm running on gas here. I'm not working a 12-step program. I'm not being of use. I'm not sponsoring. I'm not sponsored. I'm rarely taking inventory. I'm doing the occasional meeting, but a drink is going to come sooner or later. And this little chip here is going to make no difference to that. So I plunged myself back into 12-step recovery. I went through the steps again with someone who didn't have the time that I had. And I didn't tell the person how long I was around. I just told them I was dry drunk. And we went through and had that experience of being completely lit back up. Again, very, very active with sponsorship and being of service, and really getting that relationship back with my higher power. So this is the greatest show in town. I'm so grateful for it. And as I said in my bio that I sent to Karen, the promise that our best years lie ahead of us, I believe, is always true, no matter how long around you are. So that promise is true for me today. It was true for me 18 years ago. And it's a wonderful thing. If we keep on working this program, we keep on growing, we keep on developing, and nothing is wasted. Every time we fall flat on our face, it turns into something valuable, a learning lesson, you know. So that is my experience. I wanted to talk about Sane and Sound Ideal, A, because I think it's a slightly neglected part of the book, B, because it's uncomfortable for people. And I had this experience recently. I said to a friend of mine who was having a problem with his relationship, have you revisited your Sane and Sound Ideal? Is what you're doing in your Sane and Sound Ideal? And it wasn't well received. I think he put his back up. I think he thought it was a criticism, and it wasn't at all. It was simply, if what you're doing is within your Sane and Sound Ideal, then carry on. If it's not within your Sane and Sound Ideal, the book gives us an ominous warning, which if we carry on, we're sure to drink. That's the facts out of our experience, is what it talks about. So that was my point to my friend. And he did do it. Hats off to him, because I love this guy, and he's a solid recovery guy. And he didn't like what I said to him, but he did go and do it. And then he called me back and said, yeah, it was, you know, a valuable thing to do. It was helpful for him to have a look at that. But so this is a really wonderful thing to have access to. So I won't quite go line by line, but I will talk through this part. So it's the bottom paragraph on page 68. This is now about sex. Ooh, sex. Oh God. We've gone through step one. We've diagnosed ourselves. We've had that. I had that rock bottom experience of getting to the part in the book where it says we can't stop we can't stay stopped when we want to stop, and we can't stop when we can't stop when we want to, and we can't stay stopped when we want to. Sorry. Yeah, I had this kind of rock bottom experience of just staring into the abyss, realizing I may stay sober off my own back for a week, a month, maybe a few months, but at some point that obsession is going to come back in. I'm going to pick up a drink, and so that complete rock bottom, step one. Then I was very, very open to the concept of our higher power, and I love the way our workbook in the Big Book sponsorship way of working the steps makes step two a very, very simple process. Are you willing, or are you willing to believe that there is a power greater than yourself? And if someone's willing, then they've done step two. There is no great philosophical process to that. It's, are you willing to believe that there might be? And for me, I was. Drink and drugs had been a power greater than myself. So there was no way I was going to argue with the concept of the possibility that there might be something other than that. So, and then step three, beautiful step, very, very strange experience for me, getting down on my hands and knees with another man and saying that prayer together. But I did do it, and life has never been the same since. And then we do our inventory and we look at our resentments, and we look at our fears, and we see the fatality and the futility of them. And we start to recognize with our fears specifically, there's another way of approaching it. So by that point, we come to sex, page 68. Many of us needed an overhauling there, which I certainly did. But I love this paragraph. It talks about being sensible. It talks about human opinions running to extremes. It talks about one voice's cry for sex and more sex. Another set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature. I've got a friend of mine who's just got into a new relationship. I asked him how it's going the other day. He went, "Oh, it's great. I'm on a straight pepper diet." So it talks about some people would allow no flavour for his fare, and another would have us all on a straight pepper diet. So what we do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. So what I have written in my bit next to that is we are not the sex police. So I have sponsees and friends who have a radically different sex life to me. So I went through the steps recently with a fantastic guy, gay guy, living in a big city, very, very different sex life to mine. I asked him, does the idea of kind of like a settled monogamous relationship ever appeal to you? He said, no, I've tried that. It killed me. I couldn't do it. So he has a different kind of sex life to me. I'm not the sex police. If he can, the point for me is, and what this makes really clear to me in the next couple of pages is, if I could do my sex life along spiritual principles, then have at it. Go out there, have a great time, do whatever you want, provided you can do that with spiritual principles. If it involves me lying, cheating, stealing, misrepresenting myself, all the other things that I tend to do when I'm unwell around relationships, then I can't do it. That's not within my sane and sound ideal. So we are not the sex police. We don't want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We don't want to be the arbiter of anyone's conduct generally, unless it's within the sponsor, a sponsor-sponsee relationship. But I'm not seeing a judgment on someone who has a different sex life to me. I am just encouraging them to work this process and come up with a sane and sound ideal. So then it gives us a paragraph where it talks about a review. Now, my friends, and I have lots of friends in SLA, and there's always SLA people in lots of the different meetings that I do, and they will always ask about a dating plan, and they will always ask about top lines and bottom lines. And my belief is the sane and sound ideal is the dating plan. That's my dating plan. And the top lines and bottom lines, it's going to give us our bottom lines here. This is the stuff we don't want to be doing. So we reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse suspicion, jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this down on paper and looked at it. So we have a reality check. We haven't looked on paper, cold, hard facts. This is what I've been doing. This is how my behavior's impacted other people. I think that those lists, selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate, I think you can mix that up. You can look at different words for that kind of saying. We know what we're talking about here with those words. Selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate. But I try and think creatively about that. And then who would we hurt? Unjustifiably aroused jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness. Where are we at fault? And this is the key one. What should we have done instead? So it's a bit like our inventory process where we do the step 4 and column 1, 2, and 3. And it's column 4, and we have a look at our really, really defective behavior, which is in effect not really even my will, but my disease's will for me. That's me in a diseased state without God. And then in column 5, we look at the complete opposite of that, the diametric opposite. So if I've got selfishness in column 4, I'm looking at unselfishness in column 5. That, I believe, is God's will for me. So we go through the same process here. What should we have done instead? So if I've been extremely dishonest and misrepresented myself to someone, and had sex with them, and then suddenly changed my mind about what it is I want from the relationship, then maybe that's not what I want to be doing in future. Maybe I want to be honest at the start and say, no, well, I'm just looking to date and see how things go. And instead of saying, yeah, I'm really looking for a serious relationship, and then shattering that person's hopes. That being one example. But what should we have done instead? We got this down on paper and looked at it. So in this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relationship to this test. Was it selfish or not? Now, if I'm involved, then yeah, it probably is. There's going to be some selfishness in there. For me, it's a matter of degrees, And then we ask God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. So for me, the whole 12-step program, everything we do is collaborative. We are working in collaboration with, as our big book calls it, our new employer, page 63. All of it is collaborative. We need to involve God. And I'd suffered from the delusion at times in my recovery where I think that it's actually at step 12 where we experience God. It's not. It's at step 3. We ask God to help us at that point. We make a pact. We make a deal with God that I'm going to do your work the best I can and try and stick close to you. And you're going to take care of everything else I need. And so we ask God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. So that is collaborative. We remember that always that our sex powers are God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly nor selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. So whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to go towards it. We must be willing to make amends where we've done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in doing so. Now, lots of my previous relationships, it would do far more harm for me to phone them up and say, I'm in a 12-step program now. I'm doing great. How are you? I'd really like to apologize for what I did. So we're sensible about that stuff. But I have had the opportunity to make amends to exes. It has been powerful. It has set us both free. But I would be strongly suggested you check that, run that by a sponsor, because the number of sponsees I have, and myself included, who can't wait to go back and make amends to exes, and it's not always appropriate. So, and this is beautiful. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. So this is in other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. So any other problem, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter in meditation. And my understanding of what the early AAs meant by meditation was that they would have quiet time, and they would be doing two-way prayer. And for me, in my step 11, I wake up in the morning, I try and have some real quiet time. Not easy when you've got small kids, but it does work. Sometimes I'll be so busy scribbling all my ideas about what I need to do that day, and then suddenly I'll get that experience of a small, still voice say, you need to phone that person, or what about, so that's the collaboration with God. But we need to we need to carve out some time in our lives for that to happen, that meditation. So, and it gives us a promise here, the right answer will come if we want it, which echoes page 164. Ask God in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who's still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. This is part of us getting our house in order. And once we've got our house in order, we can start to rely on that intuition. And throughout the book, really important to say, God solves our problems. It is repeated throughout the book that God solves our problems. I don't have to work out all my own solutions to my problems in life. What I need to do is get some quiet time, take that problem to God, see what comes, and then try and work with that. And it talks about that being a lifelong process, but in my experience, it works a treat. So God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with others is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. So again, that's collaboration, that's conscience. It's an amazing thing when you're in self-step recovery and you have that conscience. I know when I've done something wrong and I know when I need to go back and tidy that up, and I have to do it. It's imperative. If I don't do it, I'm taking a real risk, which it talks about in the next paragraph. So it says, suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? Some people tell us so. This is only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives. So if we are sorry for what we have done and we have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we'll be forgiven and we'll have learned the lesson. Okay, I believe that's describing God's will for me. God's will for me is if I make a mistake, which I do, if I'm sorry for what I've done and I have the honest desire to let God take me to better things, I'll be forgiven and I'll have learned a lesson, and it becomes a valuable experience. If, on the other hand, I'm not sorry and my conduct continues to harm others, we're quite sure to drink. So there's not many points in the book where it warns us that we are quite sure to drink, but there's that's one of them. So that is an ominous warning for all of us. I need to pay attention to that. We're not theorizing; these are the facts out of our experience. So my experience was I've got my very first Sane and Sound ideal here. It fell out the back of my very first big book. I've got a lovely leather cover for my first big book, and it fell out the back of it. And it's a bit wishy-washy, it's a bit flimsy, but it talks about being honest. It talks about being – stay away from unhealthy relationships. dating, like I remember the tension when I did this, which was that I didn't want to get married and settle down. I didn't want to get into some heavy committed relationship. I wanted to still play the field and kind of have fun. And I was only 27. I was newly sober. But in some sense, I knew that I wanted to, this is an aspirational kind of sane and sound ideal. Thoughtful and considerate, communicate honestly, make her feel special. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. And every single thing on there I failed to do in that first 5 years. Like I fell flat on my face in every single area of it. In actual fact, I ended up in SLA at about 5 years sober, which was a wonderful, wonderful thing. I ended up in SLA How. The fellowship in London at that time was fantastic. Lots of old timers in other fellowships who were in there working on their SLA stuff. And I had a really, really powerful experience with it. And I saw it all as an extension of my sane and sound ideal, step 4. But this sane and sound ideal, I completely failed to achieve in those first 5 years. But I look at it now and I realize that's what describing my marriage now. Like I'm faithful in a committed relationship. I mean, that's me now. All of it's come true. Yeah, all of that has come true. It didn't come true in quite the way I thought it would. I thought God would just click his fingers and I'd suddenly be that. It came by trial and error, but I was like, wow, that's actually come true for me. Now, I have a sane and sound ideal, a much better version of one for my marriage now. So I did a sane and sound ideal in my early days, did another one as part of my SLA work. When I met my wife and became, got engaged, then I had to revisit my sane and sound ideal. So the point for me is that first 5 years where I was falling flat on my face, making loads of mistakes, I was sorry. And I didn't let my conduct continue to harm people. I kept making mistakes. I was all over the place with dating. I'd get into relationships and then get out and then try and get back in. I was a mess, a complete mess. But within me, there was a desire to improve. There was a desire to stop doing that. And I really committed to working a 12-step program around it and doing some therapy. And what the fruit of that is that I'm a happily married man now. So I believe that promise in a way. So if Chris was sorry for what Chris had done and had the honest desire to let God take him to better things, in my experience, I've been forgiven and I learned my lesson. All of that experience has been useful in my marriage. I know exactly what I don't want to be doing. But if I had not been sorry and my conduct continued to harm others, we're quite sure to drink. So yeah, there you go. The interesting thing is Bill W, who wrote this, I understand had problems all around this area. He really struggled with this stuff. And that doesn't make it any less powerful or meaningful. It's he was a human. He was the same as the rest of us. He got it. I think he got this right in lots of ways. But he like all of us, flesh and blood, he had his problems in this area. So then it sums everything up. So sum up about sex. We earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and strength to do the right thing. And here's the crux of it. So if sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. So that's the bottom line for this. I need to be thinking of other people. I need to be actively working with others. Even if I'm not sponsoring others, I need to be actively thinking of them, helping other people, being of service to newcomers, being of service to the old lady who lives next door, being of service to my elderly parents, whatever it is, out of self, thinking of other people. How can I serve them? Because I had a resentment pop up recently, and this is an old resentment, so boring to me. It's like a zombie resentment. Every now and again, it will pop back up, normally at times when I'm not doing particularly well. And I thought about that, and I could spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on therapy talking about that resentment, why it comes up, what it's caused by, what within me is triggered, my inner child, the primal wound, all this different stuff, and all of that is valuable stuff. Don't get me wrong, but the solution to that particular resentment was to pick up a phone to someone I know who's struggling and think of them, and it cleared it completely. So if we are having sex problems in our sex life, problems in our relationships, it is fuel to make us useful to other people. So just to say, so I got some scribbled notes here. Yeah. In 2011, my dad got very, very unwell. He had something similar to a stroke. He ended up, it was a type of cancer in his brain. His body reacted with an antibody, which attacked his brain. So he was left with all the symptoms of a stroke, but completely compos mentis. And I had to take, for various reasons, I took legal responsibility for him. His partner left. My brother was drinking at the time. He's now sober, but it was a very, very tough situation. And I remembered hearing a fantastic AA speaker who's called Joe Hawke. Him and Mark Houston used to do a book study together, which was really influential for me when I first got sober. I used to listen to it all the time. And he was a super spiritual guy, but he spoke about using a sane and sound ideal in other areas of your life. And it was the first time I'd ever heard that. So in desperation, probably about 6 months or a year into this situation with my dad, he lived in Newcastle, which is about 300 miles away from where I live. The whole situation I found horrifying, couldn't quite get my head around it, really, really struggled with it. Had all sorts of self-pity. Anyone who knew me at that time, I would be banging on about it constantly. It was a real trauma for all of us. But Joe Hawke's words popped into my head, which is talking about a sane and sound ideal. So in desperation, I went through exactly this process. Sorry, I've got work notifications popping up. Yeah, so I went through exactly this process, not applying it to that, sex relations, but around my dad, around what has been going on with my dad, around this, my review, my conduct over the years past. Well, I still had resentments against my dad, which I needed to deal with. At times in that early phase, I was so disorientated by the whole thing. I was angry at my dad just for surviving the cancer and being in that position. I hadn't unjustifiably aroused jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness, but it had been I'd hurt a lot of people by becoming emotionally overwhelmed and lashing out at family members and just being off kilter. So there was a lot for me to look at and say, this is going wrong. There was a lot for me to review. And what should I have done instead? Well, for me, I had been completely disorganized and disorientated. I'd been winging it. So for me, it tightened up all my processes around how am I looking after him. I had to pay his rent and I had to take care of all sorts of legal things. And I'd been a mess around that. So it led me to really practically tighten things up. And I've got a version of that. So I had this document I came up with, a sane and sound ideal. This is where I've been going wrong with Dad. This is what I'd be doing instead. This is what I think God's will for me in this situation is, which is to look after Dad till he passes on. To take care of all the practical stuff, but also try and support him emotionally and spiritually. Very difficult. I'll come on to that. So I had this really earnest attempt at a sane and sound ideal for how I'm going to be with my dad. I did a lot of it through gritted teeth. I had on there that I was going to try and bring joy and happiness to his life. Now, what I found out over the 11 years that he survived was that he became so depressed and so unhappy that there was a lot that I couldn't do for him. I couldn't make this situation all right for him. That was an unrealistic expectation or an unrealistic hope. So I tweaked my sane and sound ideal, which is that I'm going to try and bring some joy in the areas that I can. And I looked very specifically at what he enjoyed. I had a list of things that I thought he should be doing. And I kept on bumping my head against the brick wall of it. I'd go and say, Dad, you need to speak to a counsellor. You need to speak to a priest. You need to speak to someone. You need to do a memory workshop so you don't lose your memory. And he didn't want to do any of those things. So over a period of time, I realized what I need to focus on is the three things that he enjoyed in his life: music, watching rugby, which I don't know because this is an international podcast. If you don't know what rugby is, it's like American football without the helmets. And if you don't know what American football is, it's like a rugby with helmets. So the point for me was I was able to tweak this thing and keep adjusting it. I focused then on rugby, music, and the biggest joy of his life was my daughter, his granddaughter, when she arrived. I really focused on that relationship and making sure he gets to spend some quality time with her. I really honed in on that relationship for him and stopped calling him Dad. I just called him Granddad, So he has that experience of being a grandparent and seeing his little girl grow up, And so, funny enough, I've got one of the last versions of that sane and sound ideal for my dad. And it's a desperate time where he was completely suicidally depressed and was trying to starve himself to death and refusing food. It was grim, really grim. It's bringing up a lot of memories for me. The last few years from that point, when I gave up that sense of control around my dad, from that point to when he died, I remember being quite blissful. He would spend a lot of time with the grandkids. I'd go and make sure I was doing quality visits with him. I wasn't just nipping in and nipping out. I was going and spending a few hours with him. And I'm very, very grateful for that memory. The process of doing a Sane and Sound Ideal really was just a fantastic part of that. It gave me a framework to look at this situation. This is a responsibility from God, a commitment from God, and I need to approach it as such. If I approach it as anything less than that, I'm underselling it and I'm going to struggle. So I took that and I applied it to. I have one for my marriage, obviously, is my relationship. I have Sane and Sound Ideal around my behavior at work. I had to revisit it recently. I'd had a lot of change and transition at work. A new manager came in. I took some inventory around that manager and I realized she had a very chaotic, crazy way of working, she was a really creative kind of person. Ideas, but I found it quite easy to manipulate her, and I would kind of slip between the cracks of all her crazy ideas and not do any of them and do what I wanted to do. So I had to really look at my behavior around work, and I've got a new Sane and Sound Ideal for, so I had to revisit that. Let me think. I have it as a parent. I can look at my behavior as a parent. Sometimes I will completely zone out on my phone. I'm not emotionally present for my kids. I have a tendency to do that, so I had to really look at that. That's a painful thing to say. Sometimes I want to kind of watch the football scores come in instead of engaging with my kids, but it's a helpful to be honest about that and change it and ask, that's not God's will for me. God's will for me is to be really, really present with my kids and be a great dad. I think the tools that it gives us in this part of the book are fantastic. They apply right across the board. It's collaborative. It involves us and our higher power. For me, it's always really helpful to go back, have something to go back to and refer back to and see how am I doing with it. I think, Karen, I've probably said enough. Maybe we can get into the questions if that's all right.
Yeah, and you read my mind because I was biting my tongue not to interrupt you there.
Oh, sorry. Apologies.
No apologies. I'm just loving that we're on the same wavelength. Being a addict, codependent, parent, working woman, and feeling that with age I'm getting, adult onset ADHD that just gets brighter and better every year. Whenever I listen to a speaker, I'm always like, okay, you're all over the place. You got way too much going on. You need God's help, but find a good nugget or two. So I'm like listening to you and I'm like, Eureka, that's a really good nugget. What is my sane and sound ideal here? And you're talking about being present with your kids. I just went on a vacation and I was really not present on vacation. Only an addict can pull off a dumb thing like that, right? To be on vacation and be like, oh, I could talk to the principals and teachers and hear about all my kids' issues because they're not eavesdropping, right? Because I'm on vacation to do self-care, to do my recovery so that I could be of service to you all, to my family and everyone, except that I'm not on vacation because I heard about all my kids' issues. I came into the stand-up, the comedy act, and I burst out crying because I was so overwhelmed with everybody's issues, including my own. I was like, and if I were to have this trick and say, hey, is this your sane and sound ideal about how to be on a vacation? They're like, no, big fat no. It's like if I'm at the office and WhatsApping, if I'm sitting with you and thinking about how I have to get my taxes done and, making a doctor's appointment, I just made a doctor's appointment, 10 minutes before I have to be at exercise. I'm like, wow. Is that a sane and sound ideal? No, that's probably a recipe for unmanageability. But see, so there's a really good nugget in here. Is this a sane and sound ideal for my parenting? Is this a sane and sound ideal for my faith, for my meditation, for my equanimity? I'm loving that. Can you give us some other examples where you're able to see craziness or unmanageability and stick in a sane and sound ideal? Even my friend said to me, you're on vacation, you should put away your phone. I'm like, yeah, but my kids come first. And I was just like, no, I probably should put away my phone.
Yeah. Well, sponsorship is one. I've got Sane and Sound Ideal as a sponsor. The book gives us instructions, but we all need to work out how to apply them. And, as it ties in with our personality. One of my defects of character is I'm way too polite. I'm way too polite. So I'm easily taken hostage by sponsees. So I'm kind of listening to this crazy, crazy story. And I love hearing our friend Nikki in our Noodle meeting, the way she manages that, because she'll give someone a minute of have at it, just rant as much as you want. And then we're going to get down to the big book and the solution. So I have a sane and sound idea. I have, for the sponsorship, there are things I've done as a sponsor that haven't worked or have I can improve, and so I do the opposite of that. So around sponsorship, I'm trying to be more direct. I think it is our job to give an ominous warning. I had it recently. A sponsor phoned me up. I'm not doing any meetings, so I'm not meeting any newcomers. I haven't got a home group. I stopped doing my evening review, and sometimes I just can't be bothered praying. But she said, I'm not feeling the full effects of the program. I said, well, you're not doing anything. Yeah, you're not. Why would you be feeling the full effects of the program? You're not working a 12-step program.
You're not working the program.
I don't feel like I'm going to pick up. I said, none of us ever feel like we're going to pick up, but then until we do, But the point is, if you don't pick up, you probably just drift off. You might just drift off and then pick up. But so I gave it to her very, very bluntly. You're doing nothing, and you're not going to get any of the fruits of the 12-step program. You're not even putting in half measures. You're putting in nothing. And she didn't like it, and I haven't heard from her since. But I've done my job as a sponsor there. If she's looking for 12-step recovery and the solution that the big book offers, here's what I do, and here's what you need to do. So that was an interesting one. So I have it around sponsorship. The things that I don't do great as a sponsor that I can improve on, and things that I do well. And it's always nice to be a sympathetic ear, but what I don't want to be doing is listen to craziness and lunacy. People don't like sometimes being told to take inventory, do they? Someone will phone up, they've got a seed in resentment, and I'll say, have you written this down? Had a look for your part? Run it by me, maybe, or trusted friends, and then thought of someone you can help, or just thought of someone you can help at all. And they go, because they think that resentment is real. And what we learn in 12-step recovery is columns 1, 2, and 3 are just scenery. The real issue is column 4, isn't it? And that's not always well received. So yeah, I have it around sponsorship. I've got a health issue that I'm having an operation in a couple of weeks. So I need to do some real time, spend some time and effort on health. A sane and sound ideal for my future health, because I've had a recurring heart issue, and I'm having keyhole heart surgery in a week's time, which I don't care how good my recovery is. I've got some fear around, don't care how much of a 12-step program I work, there's going to be some fear around that. So longer term, I'll get the operation done. Hopefully it's a complete success and all goes well. And then longer term.
Well, and you're probably, Christy, you're on here, so I'll allow myself to, to butt in on your God squad, and you're going to reach out to people, right? And, I just did step 3 with a sponsor this morning, and right, you're going to say, I give my will and my life and this operation over to the care of God as I understand Him. I'm powerless over medicine, over the scalpel, over this doctor, and I'm going to pray, God, that you watch over me, right? See, absolutely. He might have fear, but Christy also has Karen who cares about him. The whole Reco12 community that cares about him is going to pray for him. He has the whole, I'm going to cry, the whole Noodle It Out with Nikki gang that cares for him and loves him. And he's got a higher power that cares and loves him like a single firstborn son, the crown jewel, So he may have some fears. You may have some fears, but you have got a practical program of action. You've got your spiritual practice that you put first before everything, before financial, before family. You've got a relationship with a higher power and a program. You've got your vigorous course of action that you're going to work all the way up until, they put you out, right?
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, that's what I needed to hear today. One of my aspects of the sane and sound idea that comes up in different things is I don't suffer alone. I'm not a martyr there, in isolation. I speak to my fellows, I touch base with my fellows, and I support my fellows in the same way you've just supported me. So this is how we look after each other in this, and it's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And that, that sharing and that vulnerability gives us, us a chance to do our step 12, our service, not just hosting meetings or giving out literature, 12-stepping someone, but our service of caring and being, intelligent agent spearheads of God's everlasting creation. So let's all pray for Chris that he come out on top with this, and that the heart issue be taken care of, and that he, live and be well and continue to be of maximum service to God and our fellows.
Beautiful.
And see, that's a sane and sound ideal. See, when I stopped, but I just said that to you, Well, that is my sane and sound ideal of being your fellow. It's not like, hey, can you talk? Can you talk? Are you available? Okay, thanks. Okay, I'll send you the recording, in and out, ATM, bye, boom, bang, bang, bye, on to the next meeting. Oh, crap, do I have someone set up for next week? All right. But it's a sane and sound ideal of being on someone's God squad. How are you?
Yeah.
There's like a person on that screen, right?
Yeah.
How you doing? How's your kid? One of my sponsees is going for chemo. Another has an autistic kid. It's not just bludgeon her with the big book. We take it to the big book.
No.
Right?
That's right. Absolutely.
And I love about what you say about a sane and sound ideal, because again, as someone who's got some serious, a really busy, big life, thank God, and a big, busy brain that has this like adult onset recovery and ADHD and other stuff going on in it. I was like, we are undisciplined. We let God discipline us. So I'm just sharing for you all on this line, forever. This is valuable. I'm really trying to take, be Chris's pupil as he's teaching us from his experience, strength, and hope here. Is like, well, my sane and sound ideals on sponsorship is I drop off my kiddos, my 2 little girls at 8 a.m. 8:10, my first sponsee calls me. And you know what? It works. It's on the schedule. Like, how's that for a light bulb moment? Like, same time every day, duh,
Yeah,
as opposed to fly by the seat of my pants, which is what I do, given my druthers, as an undisciplined addict. Because when my other sponsee asked me about speaking in the evening, she's a single lady and I'm doing bedtime. I don't even look at my phone. I don't even see my phone. I barely remember my first name, right? Because I can't be sound and sane at bedtime because it's just a lot of prayer and melatonin.
Yeah. This is the thing. I mean, we're human. The thing I love about connecting with God Squad members, like I said, you hear real people doing real things, trying to practice these spiritual principles in real life. And in real time, sometimes it's challenging. It's hard. It's not easy. But we do it. We keep improving, keep tweaking it. My youngest son has gone to school, so all of our routine has changed completely. And I'm still struggling to get to grips with it. How do I fit my step 11 in there? But I'll find my way. I just need to keep on practicing. The desire, as it says, my motives are good. My desire to do my step 11 in the morning is strong. I'll find a way to do it. God will present a way for me to do that. But life is constantly changing. It's constantly in flux, and we're constantly trying to recalibrate and get back on track. So yeah.
And that's a perfect segue into the question we got from Brian D.
Cool.
About juggling. The last question in the chat about juggling fellowship. Wanting to put the spiritual practice first, and then, to have a sane and sound ideal about parenting means, my kid has a doctor appointment. I don't, first talk to my sponsee and then blow them off, right? I don't, take them to school at 9 because I have a sponsee or a meeting, right? I take them to school when school starts, and then I see where I could go to a convenient meeting, right? So maybe you want to look, can you see her question in the chat, or would you like me to read it?
Yeah, no, it's fine. Let me just blow this up a bit so I can see it a bit better. Hang on a sec. Bex in Somerset, yes. Your experience, please. As a busy parent, how do you know God's will versus my will, especially when torn between meetings, cleaning house, right? So being bad about not getting into a meeting if you're letting fellowship down. How do I know what God wants from me versus my brain, which is a lie that's often hard to see at first? Yes. So my list of priorities are my spiritual connection, i.e. my 12-step program. That has to come first, because even above my children, because I will, without that, I run a risk of picking up. I had a dear friend recently who picked up, he was many years sober, and he did more damage in 6 weeks than he would have done in 6 years previously. So I need to stay clean and sober, and I need to be working my 12-step. Sponsorship is part of that, but it would be my spiritual connection, my family, my job. I need to pay the bills, and then I would have sponsorship. So if I had a clash and meetings, but if I had a clash between any of those, that's how I would be working it out. So for me, my kids would have to come first because I look after them. I'll be fitting the meetings around them. I fit my sponsorship around my kids. My son, my little 4-year-old son, he'd always wanted mummy to do bedtime. And so I would always do sponsorship in the evening when he was being put to bed. Now, last probably month and a half, he's become obsessed with daddy doing bedtime. And it can take an hour to get him off to sleep. So I've lost that slot for sponsorship. So I now have to think creatively about how I fit that in during the day. And that's absolutely fine. But getting my little 4-year-old off to bed, I'm prioritizing that for whatever reason. He likes daddy doing it, so daddy's going to do it, and I try and fit that around. So for you, God's will versus my will, is a tricky one, but we look at that in our inventory. When we take inventory, we look at our defects of character versus God's will. And I love the four absolutes: absolute honesty, unselfishness, honesty, unselfishness, purity, and love are the four absolutes. So that's the kind of yardstick by which I'm trying to look at God's will. Anything other than that is probably going to be my will. But the feeling bad thing, yeah, and Karen will know what I'm talking about. As parents, you can often feel bad about you're letting someone down in it. But for me, I have a clear list of my priorities and how I'm going to structure things. So for you, Bex, maybe that would be something to think about. Is you get some, cover for one meeting a week that you're doing, or 2 meetings a week that you're doing, and you make sure that time is covered, and then the rest of the time you're just focusing on being a mum, I guess, would be my feelings around that. But Bex says, thanks, Chris, very helpful. Right, okay, loads of love to you, Bex. I'm going to put my number in the chat as well, by the way, so we can, if you ever want to speak, that would be great.
I'm going to add something to that too. You read my mind when you said my name, because I was literally thinking something along these lines. Bex, sorry, I said it was Brandy's, our beautiful Bex over there in the UK, super mommy of 6 as well. The other thing, Bex, about the 4 absolutes, it includes you, sweetie. Is this loving, honest, truthful to Bex? Yes, it is loving, honest, truthful to have my kids on a schedule. But it's like, if I'm fainting, passing out, exhausted, I like to put my kids to bed because I usually just pass out on the beanbag next to them and start, speaking gibberish while telling them a story, part in Hebrew, part in English, forgetting what I'm even saying, and drool coming down the side of my I'm just exhausted. Yeah. That one, Chris, where you're putting your kids to sleep and they really put you to sleep.
Yeah.
So make sure it's help, it has to be the 4 absolutes with you too. And things may change. One day having a early bedtime is the most helpful thing to you and them and all of humanity. And sometimes, a kid needs to talk, and the helpful thing to do is break that rule. And I'm careful with that because I'm undisciplined. But that's why we're always praying for the sane and sound ideal, because sometimes we have to switch things up, right? Anyway, those are my thoughts. 4 absolutes to you. And always the sane and sound ideal. Is it sane and sound for me to take vacation now where I'm overwhelmed? No, I need to hold down the fort. Is it sane and sound now? Yeah, I need a break. Same question, different answer based on my step 11, asking God to guide me. I'm going to ask you about how you shifted in your sex ideal and going from being, Mr. Super Dater,
Oh, yeah. I wasn't Mr. Super
Dater. A married man. That sounds a lot more sane and sound.
So one of the interesting things, when I was new in recovery, I had a lot of old time. I went to an old school AA meeting, kind of an original kind of AA meeting, and there were some real old timers there. And they said, look, Chris, the early AAs didn't like people being single. They liked them married or in a committed relationship. And I couldn't figure out why. And I now know that for me, for this alcoholic addict, it is much easier to practice spiritual principles within that setting than it is for me to be dating, because my defective stuff will come up around dating, around I'll misrepresent myself, and it doesn't matter how committed I am to working the 12-step program, but that stuff will creep in. So, I believe we commit in step 3 to God building and doing with us, and God built and did with me, and I found myself when I met my wife, having been commitment phobic all the time previously, when I met my wife, I just knew absolutely, yes, we want the same thing. We're moving in the same direction. And so it was kind of an effortless thing, but I guess it was a process of being ready. And a lot of those, the really interesting thing for me is all the mistakes I made in dating and being single and what have you, that led me into SLA. None of that was wasted. It's all part of the process. I can see that meant that 8-year process that I went through to when I met my wife, all of it was necessary for her to even consider me as a husband. You know what I mean? Like, all of that had prepared me perfectly for that moment when I met my wife and just began to think about, well, yeah, this could really go somewhere. And all that commitment phobia just fell away. So, but I would say, yes, we need a different sane and sound ideal for different points in our life. And if you're young, free and single, you've got a very, very different sane and sound ideal to me. The longer I'm in recovery, the more I come to resemble Homer Simpson. So I'm at the Homer Simpson phase of my life, and I'm happy with that. I'm comfortable with that. It suits me. And Bex and Karen will know what I'm talking about. I only need to turn my head 5 degrees one way or the other, and I've got some of God's work to do. You know, whether it's putting clothes away or putting the breakfast away or tidying up so that it becomes nice when my wife comes home, or whatever it is. You know, family and marriage affords us a lot of opportunity for that. And I see Brindy has put in my sane and sound ideal as a spouse. Well, I will read you what some of what I've currently got. To have a happy, healthy, functioning, loving marriage, to be the absolute best husband I can be, to set the foundation for parenthood and our life together, and to make our marriage a solid foundation for our rest of our lives. And then I've got lots of kind of, you know, our relationship is healthy, strong, and thriving based on trust. I live the saying, I do what I say and I say what I do. I want to be a really rock solid, reliable spouse. You know, if I tell my wife I'm going to do something, that she can trust me to do it. I grew up in an alcoholic home. Everything was chaotic all the time in my family home. So we would often be at the school gates waiting for mum to arrive and she just wouldn't be there. Or we'd end up in, you know, someone would take us from the school gates and pick us up and we'd just end up in a house we didn't know who they were, you know, or the parents of a friend or something. It's all very weird. So my family life is not like that. It's very, very, my kids are growing up in a really reliable setting. And my wife has a really reliable husband, thanks to 12-step recovery. And so one of the things that I'll tell you what I'm failing to do as a husband, Brindy, is that to spend quality time with my wife, just one-on-one, us going on a date. And because things have been so busy the last few months, I've let that completely slide. And we could really do with it. I'm sure my wife would like to have a trip to the cinema or out for a meal or do something. So I'm going to try and be a good husband. You've reminded me, and you know, take her on a little surprise visit somewhere or do something exciting for her, because it's a lot. It's a lot being a parent and it's a lot being a mum. She's a working mum, and it's hard. It can be hard for us. So I'm going to try and liven things up for her a little bit. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, to be a reliable husband is such a great gift. It's such a wonderful thing. To have integrity in my marriage is one of the greatest gifts of 12-step recovery. It makes me feel like crying just thinking about it, you know, that, it's God has worked wonders with me, taking a wretch, a very, very dishonest, self-centered wretch, and turned him into a reliable husband. So that's that step 3 in action, really. Yeah.
Well, it's amazing too, because I think you make me want to cry too. See, in this program, you know, we're liars. We're being beaten up by a liar that tells us we're no good. And we're often surrounded by liars, right? Because like attracts like. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, we start attracting good, honest people. And we know ourselves to be good, honest people who are reliable, give their word. And it's like, it's so cool. It's so cool. Like, I love my new landlord. He's like a saint. He does stuff for me. Like, I'm a person who's used to toxic, abusive, neglectful relationships, like any of the above, all of the above, you know? Yeah. And like, I have a boss who cares for me, who wants me to have R&R, who cares that I'm a widow, who cares that I get time off, who bought me new sheets when I moved. I have a landlord who fixes stuff up for me free of charge, you know, because I'm trying to be a nice and helpful person. And it is a gift. It is a gift to be a person who lives with integrity, because we draw that towards us and we help spread that light to others. I mean, it's just so cool that when I asked Christy to speak and he had to be late and we saw it and could we work it out? And it's just like, we say in Hebrew, it's halak. It's smooth, you know, it's just smooth communication. Can you do this? No, I can't do that. I will do that. I'm sorry I didn't do that. It's just like, how does the big book say? We're not getting so exhausted trying to run the show all the time, you know. Here's what I can, you know, like my daughter started saying to me lately, and I love that she started saying this, and I love that I happen to have taught it to her. My 10-year-old like loves to sleep in, and she also loves to stay up with her teenage siblings, and it's a little bit of pickle, these little kids who grow up in teenage houses. And she says to me, Mom, you have my word that I will be up at 7 a.m. Mm-hmm. So have your word? And I saw she kept her word a few days in a row. And I said to her, you know what, Ayla? I love that when you tell me you have my word, Mom, I know you mean business. Because see, now I trust you.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
You know, and I also want to take you for a beach day because I like hanging out with people who give their word and it means something, you know? I dig that. I dig that. People who take themselves seriously. No, I have fun. But people who care, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Just to say, I I knew I was getting well in relationship. I met my wife. I've always gone for very, very highly strung, quite, high demanding kind of women who drag me over the coals. And I met my wife. She's strong, independent, emotionally mature, and doesn't play any sort of games. It's very, very straight. And I realized, wow, I must be getting well if I'm in a relationship with someone like this. So to be able to reciprocate that, meet her as that, it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. Proof of the power of God working in our lives. Sometimes it has taken a long time for me, but I'm experiencing it. So yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, when we look back, sometimes it takes having fellowship. It takes having a Reco12 podcast. It takes going to meetings and be like, wow, like I only used to work for abusive people. I used to say you only used to go out with ball busters or whatever the case may be. Like we look back and we're like, it didn't happen overnight. I've been part of Spiritual Gangsters for about 4 years now. It didn't happen overnight, but I'm a changed woman. Or a lot of times now people tell me I'm really quiet. It's a funny change. I used to speak a lot. Like you've gone underground, and I'm kind of like, okay, well, I need to check that. That's feedback of my, insecurity and I am self. But part of me is like, wow, I've become more humble. I've become others focused. I don't need to make a lot of noise wherever I go, I could host a podcast and bring you all of my amazing fellows. I don't have to be a starlet anymore, and it's like, it didn't happen overnight. I've been in the rooms for 10 years, only 4 years in this fellowship, only 2 years in Reco12, So you guys I'm saying that to give you hope wherever you are in your recovery. If you're a newcomer, we welcome you. Chris put his number in the chat. I put our number in the chat. Reach out to us. If you're looking for a sponsor, if you're looking for other like-minded fellows, it's cool. My sponsor, Young L, knows to send me any kind of podcasts and stuff that have to do with parenting. People know to send me Jewish women, Orthodox Jewish women. They know that I have, I'm a properly appointed authority for sponsoring people in those communities because I know the drill. I know their social codes, etc. Chris can talk to people about being a man in recovery, being a man in a monogamous relationship. That is so cool. That is so cool. I hope you inspire other men in recovery to do the same, because that is a real gift to humanity. Do we have any other questions here? Chris, do you have anything that's bubbled up for you that you'd like to share with everyone, give over?
No, just it's been a pleasure. Just that this program continues to get deeper and broader and more technicolor, and it is just a wonderful, wonderful thing. So I'm just wishing everyone in the cyberspace and the recovery community all my love, and just wishing them for the best. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Love received, and starlighted out to all of you all. I'm going to take that love and I'm going to throw it out there tenfold like the stars in the sky. And all y'all, we love you all. Be in touch. If you need a sponsor, be in touch. If you have done your 12 steps, you best be sponsoring. And if you need help with that, if you need any mentoring, I'm sure Chris C has wisdom. I have wisdom. I have a lot of fellows who will support you on that journey. So be in touch. Chris, would you like to take us out here?
I will. Great pleasure. Thank you so much, Karen. It's been a real joy. Right, using the word God as we do when we come to understand, and using the we version of the serenity prayer. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
I've seen stars fall from above. I've fallen in and out of love. I've been high and I've been low. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. I've seen a boy become a man. Got lost without a plan. He's so far away from home. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me. Your touch is grounding me. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. I'm looking for the words to say. You make the world a better place, and I can call that place my home. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me, your touch is grounding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. So let me see just what you need to set you free, so we can be. I saw stars fall from above. I fell in and out of love. I got high and I fell low. But now I know that I just can't do this on my own. No, I just can't do this on my own. I just can't do this on my own.